Daily Bible Time, Dominic Steele. Good morning. It is Friday morning, 6th of January, and wow, Chapter 9 of Christopher Watkin's Biblical Critical Theory, Abraham and Promise. I think I'd expected this to be a walk in the park, but wow, so stimulating and so exciting. And look, you think, oh, familiar ground, and I've gone deeper. Here are the questions from the end of the chapter. Within a biblical frame, time is personal. Explain this statement. Explain what it means by viewing the Christian experience of this life as being towards fulfillment or being towards yes. In what ways are promise-making and promise-keeping fundamental to our identities as human beings? Is it ethnocentric that God gives his promises to Abram and not to everyone at the same time? Explain your response. What is the scandal of the particular, and how does it contribute to a distinctively Christian understanding of truth and beauty? And what specific context do you see this paradigm of double-click knowledge used in our society today? And now, he starts by talking about promise. Mum and Dad casually make promises, but promises are important. Promises is actually what gives us predictability. Quentin Melasso, promise is a biblical figure that nestles under the overarching category of grace. There's nothing necessary about a promise. It's a gift, a break from the natural law of cause and consequence. A promise is not a law. It's not simply the way things are. It's a personal undertaking that rests on the integrity and authority of the one making the promise. Integrity, that they'll not break it, and authority, because if they do not have the power to bring it about, there's little point promising it in the first place. We then look at the first major promise of the Bible. God promises to Abraham. The first major climax of the biblical theme of promise, it's Abraham. It's Genesis 12 through 17. God makes a threefold promise to Abraham. I'll make you into a great nation, as a people, a place. Go from your country, your people and your father's household to the land I'll show you, and a blessing. I'll bless you. I'll make your name great, and you will be a blessing to all peoples on earth. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you. That's a slight variation on Graeme Goldsworthy thing of people, land, and anyway, I like this. A people, a place, and a blessing. He picks up on themes from the command given to Adam in Genesis 1. Be fruitful, increase in number. I'll make you into a great nation, Genesis 12. Fill the earth. Go to the land I'll show you. God created mankind in his own image. I will bless you. I'll make your name great. The promise also picks up on the name image from the Babel account in Genesis 11. But this time, rather than the architects of the tower striving to make a name for themselves, God is making a name for Abraham. Now we then come to promise and time, and Watkin makes the point that time, different experiences of time, sitting in a cafe waiting for a friend who's promised to come in 5 minutes, just feels different to sitting in a cafe with no appointment due that day. He speaks of phenomenologists, people who study how things are, argue that lived time as we really experience it, is like an accordion. Time can appear elongated, as in the watch pot never boils, or compressed when we're enjoying time with a loved one. And in all experiences of time, I'm never really merely conscious of the now. I'm always looking backwards and forwards, folding my memories and my expectations into my experience at the present. He had a lovely illustration. Even in the moment of sitting at the keyboard, I'm typing a letter, but I actually have the words I've previously typed and the letters I plan to type in my mind. Most of that is tacit. Most of it is bodily muscle memory. I'm not agonizing over each letter and the spelling of each word, but nevertheless I cannot type even one word if all I'm thinking about is the present. The same is true, of course, for reading. Now, we keep going. Promise and experience. Martin Heidegger points out, life is lived in the light of our death. The certain knowledge that we will someday die shapes our experience of every moment. Our death may come tomorrow or decades in the future, but its prospect casts a future over the whole of our lives. Heidegger reminds us with the cheery thought, as soon as man comes to life, he at once is old enough to die. Now, there's a tweak on that, says Watkin, the biblical equivalent to Heidegger's authentic being a being towards death is to feel the anxiety, in Heidegger's sense, of God's promises loosening the stranglehold of the here and now and giving us a sense of being in the, but not of, the future world, and to living in a mode of anticipation by leaning in to the future fulfillment of God's promise, consciously looking back to their initiation and forwards to that promise's final consummation. He then says, on the issue of identity, if promise and fulfillment are central to our understanding of God, then they're also fundamental to our understanding of ourselves. Created in God's image, fallen into sin, we have our identity shaped by the movement of this dramatic story from promise to fulfillment in Jesus Christ. But if that's true of Christian, it's also true of the general person. Our identities, Paul Ricoeur says, he expresses it in terms of the difference between what he calls idem, identity, and ipse, identity, from the same and himself, respectively. Now, there's an interesting analysis from Watkin summarising Ricoeur. Idem, identity, permanence through time, a cup, it's essentially the same thing. It's the same porcelain, it's the same colour, it's the same weight. But you and I are not like the cup, says Watkin, quoting Ricoeur. We change over time, our moods change, our memories change, we get heavier and lighter, the cells in our body are renewed every 7 years. We do not stay the same. But if that's so, if we're not the same in the way the cup is the same, what does our identity consist of? It is for Ricoeur an ipse identity, a constancy over time that consists in me holding myself to certain commitments, to roles, to activities. I am who I am because I make promises to myself and others, sometimes explicitly, sometimes implicitly, but I keep those promises, or at least enough of them, to make my identity somewhat coherent. Now, we then turn to particularity. And Watkin says, to the modern mind, it might seem odd that God makes his great promise to one particular man who will become father of one particular nation, and that could strike us as unnecessarily specific or discriminatory. If the plan is to all peoples on earth, that all peoples on earth would be blessed through Abraham, then why not include everyone from the beginning? Why rest the weight of this promise on one man's slender shoulders? And there's a very interesting excursus section from Watkin on the scandal of the particular. He says it's a vivid and early instance of a biblical figure which will be returned to regularly, the scandal of the particular, a scandal because we moderns have been conditioned to value the abstract and the universal over the situated and the specific. And when we think abstract and universal, we're saying truths are expressed as general laws or mathematical equations, not as promises made to one Middle Eastern man. And we say if something is not abstract and universal, our modern minds tell us it's not the truth. On this model, we ascend from local and particular differences to abstract and universal truths, but the local and particular are not necessarily implications of the abstract and universal. In metaphysical terms, the direction of travel is always from the local to the universal, from the concrete to the abstract. And Watkin says it behooves us to remember that this predilection for the abstract is itself by no means universal. That is a particularity of our own culture. He says when we look at the Bible, what we find is the Bible does not simply reverse the prejudice to favour the local over the universal. In fact, the Bible is not opposing the particular to the universal at all. It's reaching the universal through the particular. That is very significant. Now, whereas modernity dichotomizes the universal and the particular, with the result that the universal becomes abstract and disembodied, and the particular becomes of only local interest and useful only as a means for assessing the universal, the Bible diagonalizes that false dichotomy and brings the particular and the universal into harmony. And the calling of Abraham is a particularistic means towards a universalistic end. There's then a section on sublime and beautiful that I'm going to skip over, and I'm going to jump forward and look at this faith in the promise section, which I thought was so exciting. Abraham believed the Lord. He credited it to him as righteousness. That is an archetype of faith in the Bible, so it's worth dwelling. Abraham's faith is informed, Abraham's faith is active, and Abraham's faith is dependent. Abraham's faith is an active trust in or an existential reliance on the promises that God has made to him. It is irreducibly personal. The personal God engages himself through specific verbal promises to act in a certain way in the future, and Abraham stakes his self, his livelihood, and his family on those promises. That is so different to the way we think about faith today. Today, in modern culture, faith is construed as ignorant. Faith is construed as passive. To have faith in God is commonly understood as equivalent to holding an inner conviction that God exists. Faith is construed as superstitious. This is the sort of faith that fits with the modern dichotomized world of facts and values. This also has the unfortunate consequence of redirecting the emphasis from the object of faith. Very excited this morning to see a public example of faith in God on television in the United States, where a football commentator prayed and demonstrated that, well, yes, he had faith in this moment. He spoke knowledgeably, so it wasn't ignorant. He spoke non-passively, as if God could do something, and he also spoke not in any sense that this was superstitious. It was a very exciting public moment. I think it's going to be much discussed. Anyway, there you are. That's Watkin on Abraham and promise. Super important chapter, and I'm looking forward tomorrow or Monday to looking at Abraham and covenant. The Pastor's Heart interview with Watkin published this weekend. See you on Monday. God bless.